And that's why we invited you here,
our economy,
to see where you were in 2019 and where you are now.
America's military and ensure we have the most lethal and best fighting force in the world.
Madam Vice President, they're giving me a hard rap.
Well, are we witnessing the Kamala collapse? It certainly looks like it. Vice President Kamala Harris was absolutely smoked in a sit-down interview with Fox News host Bret Baier, in a move that was as bold as it was risky. She took the chance to gain support from independent voters with just weeks before Election Day. But instead, she crashed and burned. I'm Ben Swan. This is Truth in Media. I've been telling you for weeks that the biggest mistake the Harris-Walz campaign has made is not doing tough interviews. And to wait until the final hour to do one is a really, really bad idea. Vice President Kamala Harris's recent media blitz is an act of desperation. Well, when you get desperate, you do foolish things. And boy, did this seem foolish. First, Harris is questioned about immigration, and immediately she appeared to dodge and deflect, dodge and deflect. The question was so simple. How many illegal immigrants have entered the country during the Biden administration? And here's what she said, or wouldn't say.
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration, because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
do you,
now,
just a number. Do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Bret, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have
it's a rough estimate of 6 million people have been released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question, I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
To follow that, she wasn't about to answer the question and engage in policy. In fact, she couldn't even bring herself to call the problem a crisis. And what about Harris's time as vice president? She doubled down, saying there's nothing she would have done differently, but then said if she wins, her term would be nothing like Joe Biden's. She claims to represent a new generation of leadership. Here's the problem. Hear how she responds to polls that 79% of Americans, 79%, think the country is headed in the wrong direction.
Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade,
but
people
you're the
have
lever
become.
Of power.
But listen.
Do you know what she's talking about? At a time where support is low and she's given a platform to reach a new voter group, she fumbles around and is unclear with her messaging. Here's the thing. None of these questions were shockers. She should have been ready for all of them. And instead, she seemed to be ready for none of them. But one thing that really did seem to catch her by surprise was the point at which she was asked about Joe Biden's mental capacity and when she realized it had diminished.
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room, and he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Bret, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
Harris stuck to her well-rehearsed script, throwing praise at Biden, then steering the conversation back to, you guessed it, Donald Trump. But here's where she really comes off as disingenuous. As his vice president, Harris vouched for Biden's fitness for office, even after millions witnessed the president fumble and mumble through that first presidential debate. It's flat out dishonest. If this interview was supposed to reassure the American people, and specifically independent voters, that she's going to turn the page forward, she couldn't tell you one thing she was going to do without reverting to the same stump speech that she has repeated over and over and over again. Congratulations, Democrats. You have a parrot for a nominee. Joining me now to discuss is TJ Roberts. He is a candidate running for election to the Kentucky House of Representatives, District 66. TJ, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me on, Ben. Appreciate it.
So absolutely. What stood out to me about this interview, really more than anything else, was this is the first time that viewers, I think, actually got to see a tough interview, which led to Kamala Harris getting mad. It's the same kind of mad that she tried to draw out of Trump during their debate. How did you see it?
I saw it the exact same way, and I frankly saw it as the contrast with our political class, where you can have an artificial politician or you can have an authentic one, right? Kamala Harris demonstrated that fundamentally she is an artificial plant. She was put there by the Democrat elites because they knew there was zero chance of Joe Biden winning after the first debate. And frankly, part of that, though, is because we have a new generation that craves authenticity because they have been lied to so much. That's our millennials, that's Gen Z voters, that's the people that are bearing the consequences of the near century of progressive policies that has economically crushed us, that Kamala Harris is a part of.
Wow, that's such a good point, right? There's this kind of fabricated, not grassroots, but instead astroturf candidate who's simply appointed. Not one single person has cast a vote for her yet. So why do you think her team has waited so long? Because it seems as if the original plan was what they did with Biden in 2020. Don't go out there, don't give interviews, don't give speeches, right? Stay away as long as possible. It wasn't working, and so now at the 11th hour, they're sending her out into the most aggressive interviews where she's just getting trounced.
I think a lot of it was that they realized that the polling was so bad, the state of our nation is so bad, that incumbency is not an advantage anymore. Ben, I took out a candidate who had been in office since the year I was born by 50 points, despite him having me out fundraised 10-1, despite everyone knowing his name. But the reason why was because they governed poorly. Likewise, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris had 4 years to turn this country around, to get us out of the COVID disaster, to get us back to a market where people can prosper. They failed miserably. They prioritized any interest other than the interest of Americans. They had their chance and they failed. They figured that the Hail Mary option was just put her in front of the media in the hopes that she can slander Donald Trump and get independent voters to hate her less than they hate Donald Trump. And that was a disaster. That was an abject failure last night.
I think the idea that we're going to continue to vote for the lesser of two evils is a failing message. Tell us about your platform. You mentioned that you've taken out a long running incumbent. Why did you decide to enter the race for Kentucky House?
So I entered the race to restore the founder's vision for the role of government, which is the preservation of life, liberty, and property. Generally speaking, I don't know how to run your life. Constitution doesn't give me that authority. Even if it did, wouldn't be comfortable making that decision. I've ran on free market principles, on an absolute adherence to our United States Constitution, ran on the grassroots, focused on what the people were demanding rather than what the special interests in the capital were demanding. Likewise, that's what I view what Donald Trump is doing, where we're actually getting back to that limited role of government, where we're actually, rather than just slowing down the growth of government, we're actually getting back to that original intent.
Imagine the idea of not slowing the growth of government, but shrinking the size of it. Could be a completely different country. TJ Roberts, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Well, it seems like we are already seeing the impacts of Kamala Harris's interview with Fox News. Take a look at this. This is the live betting odds on Kalshi.com right now. It's showing Donald Trump with a 56% chance of snagging the presidency. Kamala Harris, she has dropped now to 44%. And that term we used at the beginning, the Kamala collapse, we stole it from these guys. She also appears to be losing every battleground state except for Nevada. Now, remember, these are not official poll numbers. They're betting odds from a legit prediction site. If you place a bet, it's going to get streamed live across the entire internet. So while it's not gospel, it gives us a pretty solid glimpse of where this roller coaster of a race might be headed come election day, because people here are betting real money, which means they actually have something to lose. Well, hot on the heels of aid sent to the Middle East, Washington has just announced yet another round of support headed to Ukraine. Yes, of course. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has tweeted an additional $425 million will be sent from the U.S. to bolster Ukraine's defense efforts. Thank goodness, because they don't have enough over there, right? Now, that's not exactly a shocker, but here's what's really interesting. The reaction it sparked. Who cares about his tweet? Look at the tweet responses, because Gunther Eagleman tweets this, quote, "You're a traitor. Not another penny to Ukraine. We have millions of forgotten Americans. This money could help." Another user writes, $425 million to Ukraine for a war that does nothing for America. Meanwhile, FEMA is broke back home. And Ian Carroll adds, quote, "Remind us how much has gone to hurricane survivors here? Expletive traitor." This tweet is worth looking at, not because of the dribble from Anthony Blinken, but to read the comments alone. If you think Americans are still behind the funding of this war in Ukraine, think again. Americans are frustrated and fed up with seeing their tax dollars shipped overseas for causes that benefit no one but Ukrainian oligarchs, and of course, defense contractors. This is why the war in Ukraine and all foreign interventions that do not directly impact the U.S. need to be stopped today. It's not about America first anymore. Now I'm seeing people talk about America only. That is our show. You can catch all of our latest coverage on the race. Check us out on X at @truth_in_media, and you can watch all of our full episodes right now at truthinmedia.com.